In the startup world, numbers are everything. A company's valuation often rests on its user growth, engagement rates, and the size of its potential market. These numbers can mean the difference between attracting millions in funding or fading into obscurity. But numbers can also become weapons when they are twisted or fabricated. The case of Javice and Olivier Amar shows how the promise of rapid growth and big data can unravel into one of the most shocking fraud cases in recent memory. Their company, Frank, promised to revolutionize how students applied for financial aid. Their story drew headlines, attracted investors, and eventually convinced JPMorgan Chase to pay $175 million for what it believed was a platform with more than 4.25 million users. But that promise turned out to be built on a lie. In 2016, Javice officially founded Frank, operating initially under the website frankfafsa.com. The company's mission was clear: help students and families simplify the complex free application for federal student aid FAFSA. The FAFSA process is notoriously confusing, and mistakes can cost students thousands of dollars in aid. Frank promised a streamlined, user-friendly process, providing guidance, error detection, and additional support services such as appealing financial aid decisions. Frank's pitch was compelling. It wasn't just about convenience, it was about fairness. Javice framed Frank as a social mission, giving every student a fair shot at education by making the financial aid process less daunting. Investors loved the idea, and Amar helped craft the growth story. Together, they positioned Frank as not only a tech solution, but also a moral one. As the company grew, so did its reputation. Javice landed on Forbes 30 Under 30 and other lists celebrating young entrepreneurs. Amar, as Chief Growth Officer, helped drive the company's image as a fast-scaling startup with national impact. By 2021, Frank claimed to have 4.25 million users, a staggering number that suggested the company had captured a huge share of its target market. Javice and Olivier Amar connected through New York's entrepreneurial and financial networks. Their shared interests in education, financial services, and startup culture aligned naturally. Javice brought the vision, charisma, and founder credibility. Amar brought growth expertise and operational know-how. Together, they built a partnership that aimed to make Frank appear not just useful, but unstoppable. Their dynamic was complementary. Javice positioned herself as the socially driven innovator, someone who could change the system for the better. Amar played the role of the strategist and builder, focused on the numbers, partnerships, and the appearance of scale. This partnership would be central to Frank's rise, and ultimately to the fraud that brought them down. Javice was born in 1993 in Westchester County, New York. Her upbringing blended privilege, opportunity, and a deep cultural heritage. Her father, Didier Javice, was a French-born financial professional working in risk management and asset consulting. Her mother, Natalie Rosen, pursued a career in education and later became a life coach. The family divorced when Charlie was about 10 years old, splitting her time between her father's home in Mamaroneck and her mother's in Larchmont. She attended the French-American School of New York, a private bilingual institution known for rigorous academics. From an early age, Javice was described as ambitious, intelligent, and determined. She often spoke about her grandmother, a Holocaust survivor, who instilled in her the belief that education was the one possession no one could take away. This theme of education as empowerment became central to her personal brand and, later, her entrepreneurial ventures. Javice went on to attend the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania, graduating in 2013 in just 3 years. While there, she launched her first startup, PowerUp, a platform designed to connect students to microfinance opportunities. Though the project was small, it positioned her as a socially conscious entrepreneur and laid the foundation for her next, more ambitious venture. Amar grew up in New York and also came from a background that encouraged ambition and entrepreneurship. He pursued a career in marketing and business development, building expertise in customer acquisition and growth strategies. By the time he connected with Javice, Amar had built a resume in marketing and operations roles that focused heavily on scaling businesses and expanding user bases. Amar had a reputation for being sharp, persuasive, and skilled in presenting a vision. His experience made him a natural fit for the role of Chief Growth Officer at Frank. In that position, he was tasked with driving user growth, forming partnerships, and helping the company reach its ambitious expansion goals. His role was critical in building credibility when pitching Frank to investors and, eventually, to JPMorgan. The claim of 4.25 million users was central to attracting the interest of JPMorgan Chase, the largest bank in the United States. Banks are constantly looking to expand their customer base, especially among young people who represent future borrowers, credit card holders, and investors. For JPMorgan, Frank offered a pipeline of millions of potential long-term customers. In September 2021, JPMorgan acquired Frank for $175 million. Javice became a managing director at the bank, tasked with overseeing student-focused financial initiatives, while Amar joined as part of the deal. On paper, the acquisition looked like a major win. JPMorgan could now connect with millions of students at the beginning of their financial journeys. The bank believed it had purchased not just technology, but access to a large and engaged user base. That belief was built on data and documents provided by Javice and Amar. Behind the scenes, Frank's reality was very different from the story presented to JPMorgan. Instead of 4.25 million users, Frank actually had fewer than 300,000 legitimate accounts. The discrepancy was massive. When JPMorgan's due diligence team asked for proof of Frank's user base, the scheme began to unravel. According to prosecutors, an internal engineer at Frank refused to fabricate data. Faced with the prospect of losing the deal, Javice allegedly turned to an outside academic, a data science professor, whom she paid $18,000 to generate a list of fake user accounts. The professor created synthetic data sets containing names, emails, and other details designed to look authentic. These fabricated lists were then passed along to JPMorgan during due diligence. Amar, as Chief Growth Officer, reinforced the inflated numbers in his communications with the bank. The combined effort painted a picture of massive growth that simply didn't exist. After the acquisition closed, JPMorgan began integrating Frank into its operations. One of the first steps was reaching out to the supposed user base of 4.25 million students. The results were alarming. A huge percentage of emails bounced back as undeliverable. Engagement was far lower than expected. JPMorgan launched an internal investigation. It quickly became clear that the numbers they had been sold did not align with reality. Instead of millions of users, they had purchased access to only hundreds of thousands. The rest of the dataset appeared to be fabricated. By December 2022, JPMorgan had gathered enough evidence to act. The bank filed a lawsuit against Javice, accusing her of misrepresentation and fraud in the acquisition of Frank. The lawsuit caught the attention of federal investigators. In April 2023, the U.S. Department of Justice indicted both Charlie Javice and Olivier Amar on charges of securities fraud, wire fraud, bank fraud, and conspiracy. The indictment detailed how Javice and Amar worked together to exaggerate Frank's user base, fabricate data, and mislead JPMorgan during due diligence. The case became one of the most high-profile startup fraud prosecutions since Theranos. The indictment alleged that the scheme was not a misunderstanding or minor exaggeration, but a deliberate, calculated effort to defraud one of the largest banks in the world. The trial began in early 2025 in Manhattan Federal Court, presided over by Judge Alvin K. Hellerstein. Over the course of 5 weeks, the prosecution presented emails, testimony, and data sets to show how Javice and Amar had deceived JPMorgan. Key witnesses included the internal engineer who refused to fabricate data, the data science professor who admitted to creating fake user lists, and JPMorgan executives who testified about the due diligence process. The evidence showed that Javice and Amar not only exaggerated, but actively conspired to create false information to support their claims. The defense attempted to argue that user was a broad term, encompassing anyone who had interacted with Frank in some way, and that JPMorgan had the resources to conduct deeper due diligence. They also suggested that the bank regretted the acquisition due to changes in federal student aid policy and was scapegoating the founders. The jury was unconvinced. On March 28, 2025, The jury returned a verdict. Both Javice and Amar were found guilty on all counts. The conviction marked a dramatic fall from grace for two entrepreneurs once celebrated as innovators. The guilty verdict underscored the seriousness of their actions. Inflating user numbers was not just a business misstep. It was fraud, executed through fabricated data and deliberate misrepresentation. Following the conviction, prosecutors pushed for significant prison terms. In September 2025, the government recommended that Javice serve 12 years in prison, along with financial penalties of $29.7 million in forfeiture and $300.9 million in restitution to JPMorgan. For Amar, prosecutors sought a similarly severe sentence, citing his role in reinforcing false claims and presenting fabricated numbers to JPMorgan. Both Javice and Amar faced decades in prison at maximum sentencing, though the final decision rests with Judge Hellerstein. Javice's lawyers submitted letters highlighting her volunteer work, family background, and personal struggles, asking the court for leniency. Amar's defense made similar arguments, portraying him as someone who had made mistakes but did not deserve the harsh penalties prosecutors were seeking. Sentencing for both is scheduled for September 29, 2025. The case of Javice and Amar offers several lessons for the startup world, investors, and corporate acquirers. Integrity matters. Inflating metrics to attract investment or acquisition is not clever marketing. It is fraud. Due diligence requires rigor. Even the largest institutions can be deceived if they fail to independently verify critical data. Partnerships can amplify deception. Working together, Javice and Amar created a stronger illusion than either could have alone. Startup culture needs limits. The fake it till you make it mentality can easily slide into criminal territory. Accountability is inevitable. Awards, press coverage, and investor praise do not shield founders from the consequences of deceit. The story of Javice and Amar is a reminder of how ambition can morph into deception. What began as a mission to help students access financial aid ended as a multi-million-dollar fraud. They built Frank, pitched it as a platform with 4.25 million users, and convinced JPMorgan to pay $175 million. But when the truth came out that the real number was closer to 300,000, propped up by fake accounts generated by a hired professor, their empire collapsed. Convicted in March 2025, Javice and Amar now await sentencing that could send them to prison for years and strip them of the fortunes they once sought to build. For students, investors, and entrepreneurs, their case stands as a warning. Numbers matter, and so does the truth behind them. What do you think about the prosecutor's recommendation of 12 years in prison, fair or excessive? Share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe and click the notification bell.
Take care, and we'll see you in the next one.